Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Victoria, for setting the platform for the beginning of this Mythbuster session on apprenticeships. I'd like to also extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you, and thank you for making the time to spend it with me today. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get started, and I'd like to start off with just asking you a couple of questions, and it's not going to be very next slide in terms of how I'm going to ask, but I'm going to be asking just some questions just so I can get a feel of your thoughts, your experiences through this, and quite rightly, as Victoria had mentioned, we are going to have a poll at the end so that we can collate your viewpoints, and then we can also have a look at how we can help and support, and hopefully we could have changed your perception and your knowledge in a lot of these questions that I'm going to be asking you today. So the first one that I just wanted to ask about is I think there is just a little connection problem. You might not be able to see my next slide, but the next slide is the 10 things you don't know about apprenticeships. And that's just making an assumption, and please forgive me for making that assumption. So it's things that garnishing from a number of discussions and number of meetings that I've had, and this will link, and I'll refer to it a bit later on in the presentation as well, is that you have a different approach for both levy and non-levy customers. So just moving on to my first question in terms of that poll. So I'd like to just ask in the room, how many had employed apprentices before? And if you could just kindly just show me, just with your raised hands, if you've ever had an apprentice. So thank you very much. I see Karen, thank you. I see your hand going up. Now, I see there's also a couple of hands that haven't gone up as well. Thank you very much. Is that Sherry? So thank you very much. I see that as well. Thank you. So just scrolling through. So there are some, there's a bit of a mixed message in terms of experience that's coming through. And I suppose from my perspective, it's a really interesting result. And I suppose I'm going to move straight on to my next poll because it links quite nicely to this, to the presentation as it unfolds. So could I just ask, how many of you are apprenticeship fans? Because apprenticeships don't come across succinctly to everybody. So I see some shake of the heads in there in terms of not being fans for apprenticeships. I'm just going to scroll through just to see whether we've got okay, Megan, thank you. See that you're a fan of apprentices and apprenticeships. Okay, so again, a very mixed bag in terms of the results. Now, what I'd like to be able to do throughout this presentation is I would like to see how I can, through sharing this information, sharing some of the processes and practices and some of the, I suppose, misconceptions that I find, certainly, hoping to change some of your mindset and your viewpoints of that. So, number one for me in the Mythbuster is that it's not just for school leavers. I have a number of conversations, and particularly when I'm talking to some of the L&D professionals or a head of delivery, and when we're going through about the apprenticeships, it's not necessarily, and please, I don't mean this in any way, shape or form disrespectful, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of understanding from the L&D team, sometimes even finance, particularly now that we have had the levy in place since 2017. It is more so the teams underneath that, the teams that we need to engage with. So that would be your departmental managers, that's going to be your supervisors, those individuals that need to release people to be able to undertake apprenticeships. And then sometimes the view is, oh, but an apprentice, isn't that for someone that's coming out of school? And what I really want to be able to, I suppose, straight away kind of explain, and I'm sure some of you may or may know this already, but apprenticeships is for everybody. There is no age limit on this. And I appreciate that sometimes people could argue, well, why is it called an apprentice? And then how are we going to work through not only our understanding as an organization, but how are we going to get that across to those individuals whom we would like to upskill if they're not coming directly into the business? So they're part of our workforce already. Because as soon as you say apprenticeships, some will say, yeah, but I've worked with the business for 15 years or 5 years, 3 years, or I have left school or college many years ago, so why would I want to do an apprenticeship? And sometimes there's a bit of a stigma with the word apprenticeship. So again, I think it's about trying to unpack that a little, and I really do wish that the government would have maybe chosen a different word or terminology, so it may be an upskilling program as opposed to an apprenticeship, and maybe making the definition so that an apprenticeship would be for what a lot of people assume it is, individuals leaving school, college, coming directly into apprenticeship, and that you would then have a workforce development program that might still be funded in the same way, but you would have two different entities. However, unfortunately, we don't have that. So there's a lot of, I suppose, discussion. There's a lot of really trying to unpack that and explain what we mean and what apprenticeships are available, as well as to whom they're available. So in terms of apprentices that are going to be within the business, and you're not taking new apprentices, let's be very, very clear about this, and anyone who comes from a training provider already will know this all too well. Ofsted are very, very keen to ensure that we are not delivering apprenticeships for the sake of delivering apprenticeships, and that will be for any workplace learning. And what we've got to be able to do as well is not just take somebody on an apprenticeship and it'll be a confirmation that they can do their role they're already doing. It's got to be very, very clearly identified that it's for new skills, knowledge, and behaviors. We've got to ensure that's taking place, because whilst we appreciate the fact that we may have some team members that are highly skilled at what they do, however, don't have formal qualifications to demonstrate that. So they've got the occupational competence, but they don't necessarily always have that certificate to, I suppose, back that up. Now, an apprenticeship in that scenario isn't going to be the best choice, because, like I said, if we are trying to confirm that they are knowing their job and they've been doing that same job in and out, but we're looking to provide that structure where we're actually saying this is the framework, and we're going to hinge with every position in our company a certain amount of CPD that's going to be attached to that. Apprenticeships aren't always the best way of doing that, because, like I said, fundamentally, you've got to be demonstrating new knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So I'm just now going to move on to my next slide. Now, the next slide is that apprenticeships, based on a lot of data that we've been gathering and data that's gathered by ELP, is that because the apprenticeships are not just for new hires, like I said, you can train existing staff members, but also, and this is, I think, for me is the key thing, is that based on research, that employees that were offered an apprenticeship tend to say 5 to 6 years. So 5 to 6 years, and dependent on how you would then work through that data, because there are some variables in it. But what was very, very clear is that an employee that has been given the opportunity to embark and on board with an apprenticeship stays with the business to 5.4 times longer. And I think that is because, from my personal experience, is that with developing those new skills, knowledge and behaviours, but also by providing an apprenticeship in the way it should be provided, which is a nurturing environment whereby that individual has time off the job to learn that 20%, and we'll get back to that 20% off the job rule in a moment, but having that time to learn and also to have that nurturing environment whereby they're learning by osmosis. They're also not just learning the knowledge aspect, but like I said, there's that skills so they can actually start to put in place what they're learning, embedding it into and almost weaving it into the very fabric of their daily lives. And the way that you can incorporate your company's ethos, its mission, its values. If you really embrace apprenticeships and deliver it in the way that is and the spirit that it's meant to, I think the learner, the company, as well as those providing it in that tripartite sense. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we all, and this is one of the strap lines of ESP, is helping learners to reach their full potential. So if we're helping individuals reach their aspirational goals, we're doing it properly, there's going to be a direct link to the business and actually assisting with the business goals and objectives. And just moving on to my next point, which is number 3. So this is just the fact that it's not just for trades individuals, and there's a wide range of apprenticeships. So there's over 598 roles in 170 industries, and we've seen through the media, we've seen through special segments, whether it be educational news by FE Week, for example, or Teleco Titans. There are a number of different avenues that we can draw this common theme from, and that is that there is a skills shortage. That the pool that we're trying to, of talented individuals that we are trying to bring into businesses is getting smaller and smaller. And I fundamentally believe that to assist with the that situation and to help with upskilling individuals and to grow businesses, that apprenticeships actually are a fundamental aspect of our approach to that. Because, like I said, whether the apprentice is somebody that you're bringing straight into the business with, I suppose a new vision, a new perception, a new way of looking at things, they will bring some of their own benefits to that. Or whether it's an individual that's already working within a company and you're reskilling, retraining them, that is going to not only help that individual, like I said, with their aspirational goals, reaching their potential, but it's also going to be assisting the business along with them and the business's needs. So in terms of my Mythbuster number 4, and that is more than just theory and knowledge. Again, just linking that skills to that element. And it wasn't, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, it wasn't designed by accident. There was a lot of thinking that went into our logo and our brand, and you'll be able to see that it's the education and skills partnership. With a real focus on both the theoretical side as well as the skill side, because to yourselves, to a lot of other businesses, having the theoretical knowledge is fantastic, but if you're not able to then take that knowledge and embed it into your working environment, you have a disconnect. You have a disconnect between that, and then that fundamentally changes into what businesses across the country will be looking at, and that will be quantifiable improvements, to be that to the culture of the company, be that to customer surveys, output, whatever that's going to be. There's always going to be a look at return of investment, whether that is return of investment in time, capacity, bringing new programs, bringing new arms to that business. They're always going to be looking at that. So from my perspective, you know, the skills aspect is incredibly important. And I think there's fair to say that there's still a lot of work to be done in the industry to be able to take away or to unpick and to be able to put a level playing field to individuals that are coming for a job interview, that will have a mixture of applicants, some from universities and some from you know, from a training company who's maybe gone through an apprenticeship. And you're having a look at somebody who has done the formal university pathway as to someone who, as I like to say, has worked and learnt at the same time, learning as you work. And you know, I think that having the ability to grow and to learn almost by osmosis, really, because you're in that environment, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I know certainly when I'm doing interviews, I always have a practical element within my interviews across all our roles, because I find that there are some exceptional CVs out there. There are exceptional techniques and training to undertake interviews. You know, there are a number of things that can be honed to be the best they can be. But if you're able to embed within your process of your interview process, that there is going to be a skills element within that, a practical aptitude, if you will, that I think brings a huge dynamic to how you're going to view that potential applicant. Because, like I said, sometimes the disconnect that we see in a lot of cases, and I'm speaking from personal experience, because as a training company, I think it's wrong to be able to come onto this webinar and talk about apprenticeships and, you know, doing a Mythbuster session on that, or it could be talking to other companies about taking on apprenticeships and even things like Kickstart, you know, adult education budget, offering opportunities there. And when the question's asked, well, do you offer apprenticeships? For us to say, no, but I think it's a really good idea that you offer them. So at ESP, everything that we offer, we deliver ourselves as well. So if we are talking about the Kickstart scheme, we took Kickstart on ourselves. We helped a lot of employers with Kickstart. If we're talking about apprenticeships, do we have apprentices at ESP? Absolutely, we do. And we have them in a number of fields. We have them in customer service, business admin, leadership and management. We also have them in technical skills such as your F&Ds and your FTTPs. I'm sorry, I'm using a lot of acronyms there, but that would be fiber to the premises. So like I said, we do offer a number of programs with skills, and one of them being in telecoms. So we have apprentices who are learning the skill set to be able to come and deliver what we have, particularly with COVID, come to rely on ever so much more than we did before. And that is to be able to get online and to be able to deliver things in a hybrid manner. If you're doing your training delivery methodology and you're going to have some face-to-face, but also some online and some webinars and some enrichment activities, the ability to be able to have things via Zoom or Teams has become an important and integral part of the makeup of meetings, delivery, sessions, to just mention a few. So now just moving on to another poll question here. Can I just ask, how many have a dedicated training budget? Because I'm sure that is something that would have come up in a lot of discussions over the years. So can you see a show of hands if you have a dedicated training budget? Okay, I'm not seeing many hands up. So I suspect that, again, with the levy, there's been a lot of discussions, particularly probably from the finance director or somebody that controls finance, pushing through and saying, well, we have, and this is for levy organisations, I'll come to non-levy organisations in a moment, levy organisations going, well, if we've got a payroll of £3 million a year, anything over that, there's going to be a percentage that's going to be going into the digital apprentice service account, and we can only use those for that account for apprenticeships. Therefore, can we please try to fit in any of the training that we want to do as an organisation via this process? And that's what I mentioned earlier, is that it's key and fundamental to understand from a business what is going to suit an apprenticeship and what isn't, because the end user's experience, your experience, can be impacted negatively or positively depending on how that process is undertaken. If the apprenticeship avenue is not the right avenue, but it's been selected to try to shoehorn some of that training in, there's only going to be pain, delays, and frustrations. So, like I said, from my perspective, we have two areas there. We've also then got the non-levy organisations, so the SMEs, which we're all under a lot of pressure. We've seen the cost of living, the inflation, the gas, electric costs, the pressure that's been put onto businesses. And so some won't have a training budget because we're trying to do our day-to-day jobs, the day-to-day jobs of the company that that's really keeping that company afloat. So so it's interesting to see like I said, that show of hands, and we'll collate that poll results later on. So thank you for that. Can I then just ask again another question? How many of you measure the ROI of your training investment? So again, if you could just maybe just show me your hands. So okay, not many. Okay. Oh, we have got thumbs up. So thank you. I see that. Thank you very much. So there are some that are doing that. There are some that aren't. And again, the variety of reasons why you're not doing that. The reason why I asked that question, so the return of investment is an important one, because when you're going to talk about an apprenticeship, we're talking about a commitment that's being made, not only by the company, not only by the apprentice, but also the delivery partner. Now, some may deliver that in-house, but however that makeup is made, whether it is outsourced by a training provider or a college or in-house, the tripartite commitment is fundamental, and to really be able to commit to something, and in my humble opinion, how can you manage something if you don't measure something? Because if you're not measuring, you're not quite sure what interventions should be put in place, when and why you're having to have those interventions in place, or why you're doing that. So for me, it's a really key aspect, and hopefully my next point could make you rethink your budget. So this is about, this is the Mythbuster that I like to call learning that sticks. So we're talking about the forgetting curve and how people retain information and how long they retain that information. And again, I'm not going to go verbatim from the slide here, but what I'd like, because you can see that slide, what I'd like you to as you're looking at that slide and reading those comments on that slide, is to take this in the fact that reinforcement is incredibly important. If we think about, and I'm going to use this analogy, just being a father to two young boys, that when you're having to reinforce something, it then starts to become a habit. And then when you start to keep on reinforcing that, that habit then turns into a behaviorism. And it's a little bit like brushing your teeth. And I don't know how many of you may or may not have children, but having to explain just that simple activity of why it's important, and doing that measure have you brushed your teeth today? Have you brushed your teeth tonight before bed? All of those kind of things. Those kind of things, you're getting your children to understand the importance of doing something, but also, if you think about it, in a lot of skills training, it's very much an EDIP session. Where you're going to explain, you're going to demonstrate, you're going to imitate, and then the big thing is you're going to practice. Practice and practice and practice until you get it right. But doing that practice, you're reinforcing not only the principles behind that, but you're also reinforcing the skills behind that. And like I said, about embedding what you're learning so that it becomes second nature, and that it is like it's woven into the very fabric of your day-to-day activities. And I believe the apprenticeship is a perfect vehicle for that. Right. In terms of the program itself, like I said, that learning that sticks. If we link it into what Ofsted will be looking at, the long-term memory side of things, really about how you're getting your learners to take that skill, that knowledge and behavior, and to keep that into that long-term memory is part of what I'm saying about that reinforcement side, and also linking it to my previous slides where I'm saying about the apprenticeship, and the reason you're doing that apprenticeship is fundamentally important, because apprenticeship is not the answer to all training needs, and you've got to make sure that the training need you have fits in the spirit of what that apprenticeship is for. So it could be that it's far more convenient to run a 2-week short course commercial program for that. But if that is so, trying to shoehorn it into apprenticeship, as I said, and some people's experience of apprenticeships, may be good, may be bad, and for several reasons why that might be a bad or good experience. But from my experience, when it's turned out to be a bad process, is because the planning, the engagement, the measuring, all those kind of things that we do before we do the onboarding. So, we're doing the excite phase, we're going through our project charter, making sure that we are doing this program is the right program. I'm sure you would have seen in a number of educational articles. There have been several providers this year that have been caught out with not having learners on the right apprenticeship program. So you've got to do your due diligence, you've got to do a good amount of planning. And if you do that, that's not a guarantee that you're going to enjoy that apprenticeship journey, but it's certainly setting you up to have the best opportunity to do so. Right, so just moving now on to my number 6 out of the 10 Mythbusters. So this for me is something that I thought was a huge benefit when trailblazers were coming and we started to hear the fact that frameworks were going to be phased out and that it was going to be standards, and that we had an employer voice, or a range of employers' voice, where we had large businesses, we had SMEs, we had training providers, we had what we now know as EPAOs, going into that kind of discussion, awarding bodies. So we are seeing some of the programs, and we're seeing some of the, I suppose, the outcome. What's the outcome of that program is we'd like an individual going through this program to have this at the end. This is what we would like them to have. And that's where that EPO process comes in. So, that endpoint assessment organization and that process, again, done independently to ensure that we are checking that that individual is ready for that completion, and has been able to demonstrate through the gateway process that they are ready and they're harnessing these skills, knowledge and behaviors for that apprenticeship. But what it has also, from my side, and in my opinion, is allowed us to be able to adapt some of the training, to the needs of the business. Now, there are limits within that, but if we recall to how it was prior to that when we had the frameworks in, and I know that in some sense, having a very structured set of criterion with scope items, and you've got performance outcomes, and then you had your knowledge outcomes. So to be able to go through that and be able to say, right, I've got a robust checklist of all of the things that are necessary for this qualification. In some cases, there is some strengths in that, but other cases there isn't. So I'll give you an example of that. So talking about warehouse and storage, for example, when we had the framework and the qualification for that as an apprenticeship, sometimes you would go in and one of the questions was to demonstrate picking of an item in accordance to your bill of materials. Well, there's not a huge amount of places that still operate to a bill of materials. If you think about places like Argos, for example, you go on, you have a look what's happening and what's available on your screen. You would then select and tick done, and everything is then given, the instruction, where the location is, it's all given via the headpiece. So actually physically having a bill of materials to go through the warehouse and pick your items and tick them off, is very limited. There are still some places that operate, some builders, merchants are still operating that kind of way, but not everybody is. And that became then quite rigid, because then you would say, well, how do I satisfy that criteria? So I think that the trailblazers and the standards have allowed us to be able to adapt and tweak qualifications to suit your needs. So what I mean by that is, when we're taking someone through a apprenticeship on a standard, you can incorporate the ethos of the company, the values of the company, the language of that company. And yes, I still accept that there are some parameters that you need to work, and there are some guidelines, because you've got to think about your training being linked to what the EPAOs are going to be looking for. So there is that balance, but what it does do is that it does provide that freedom to be able to say, okay, well, how does your business run? What's the language? What's the frequency? What processes do you use? What systems do you use? Let's try to utilize what you already have in place, rather than saying, okay, I now need you to demonstrate a bill of materials, and you say, well, we don't have one of those. Okay, well, for the sake of this, we're going to create, but that's not what you're doing as a business. So I really do believe that there is a lot of scope to be able to listen to yourselves, to listen to other clients that are thinking about apprenticeships, and making sure that it's relevant and that we are going to be able to demonstrate those skills as we're learning and going through that apprenticeship. Right, just moving on to my Mythbuster 7. So this is the noticeable benefits to your business. So I've really alluded to a lot of this already, about the new knowledge, the skills, the behaviors that can be easily implemented into the real life working arena. In terms of examples, there's an array of examples across many, many qualifications. We could give you an example, for argument's sake, from an improvement practitioner's point of view. Being able to learn what 5S stands for: sort, set, shine, standardize, sustain, within that kind of framework, or developing the 5 whys, or the Ishikawa, or some people might call it the cause and effect diagram. Those are lovely theoretical things, and you can give a lot of analogies about it. So for argument's sake, 5S, that in lean manufacturing terms, and if you're a car manufacturer, it's almost like second nature. But when you're trying to deliver that outside of that environment and trying to explain exactly what that means and how we're going to implement it into your business. One of the analogies I like to give on 5S is a bit like if I was to come and help any one of you put your knives, forks, teaspoons away after washing them. I suspect that none of you are going to just have an empty drawer where we take out all of the knives, teaspoons, forks, and just throw them in. You're either going to have one of those separators, or you're going to have one of the spindles, and you're going to be putting your knives, forks, teaspoons on the spindle. So that is a prime example of sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. Because even when you're then, I suppose, and I'm making an assumption here, if you're then doing that, or in my case, teaching my children to do that, I'd be saying, right, okay, well, no, the knives go there, the forks go there, the teaspoons go there, and every time we want to go to the drawer to go pick a knife or a teaspoon, they're going to be in that same slot, because that has been sustained and we've standardized it. We've sorted through what we had, we've shined and we've put them all in place, and therefore, in the principles of 5S, you've got the 30-second touch. You can open the drawer, or you can look at your spindle, and within 30 seconds, you can pick the utensil that you're looking for. So to be able to give an analogy from home, you can see how easy we would then be able to portray that into a business. By understanding and listening to that business, we'd be able to understand how we would be able to give them the knowledge in a lean manufacturing point of view, but then we'd also be able to give the analogy, an example that I've just given, but then we would contextualize that and say, okay, now we're going to show you how you could actually put this in place in your business. And then we would be reinforcing that through a variety of different actions for the apprentice to do, to demonstrate not only have they understood the theoretical side, not only have we given them some contextualization so that we can show them how you can implement it, but then seeing them do that over a period of time. And that is why, I know some people are really frustrated about the length of an apprenticeship, but that's why that length is there, so that those knowledge, skills, and behaviors can not only be taken on board, but they can be understood and they can be reinforced and be part of that long-term memory. So now just moving on to number 8, and again I did mention this, and this was about the 20% off the job. Obviously we have had a funding rule change, so this really came into effect as of this academic year, it's about the hours being changed, so having that standard now just 6 hours a week. I think that is a huge change, and I think that although that's to some businesses that can still be quite a challenge to be able to do, however, I do believe that if we're doing and delivering apprenticeships for the right reasons, both from a business perspective, an apprentice's perspective, and a provider's perspective, that you need to be able to provide them time to be able to not only understand, but to be able to implement what's taking place, as a natural directive of your training. Before the calculations, it used to be, how long the program is, how many hours you're working, and then, you then have to factor that into your delivery schematic and plans. Where to be able to say that it doesn't matter what program it is or what level it is, that it is that 6 hours a week. I think that can then be planned and plotted in. And I think also understanding how you can use the natural activities within a business to assist with some of that. There's some things that we do that can be incorporated into the 20% off the job that we do day in, day out, but maybe not necessarily think about it in that way. We could use shadowing, for example. Learning about, so give just an example here. If you were doing a business admin apprenticeship, and you're learning about Excel, and you're then being asked to further your understanding, could be, please could you have a look and have a read up of how pivot tables work. And that individual then needs to go online and have a look and might watch some YouTube videos on pivot tables. That time can be used and taken into account and recorded as off-the-job training as part of the 20%. So, and likewise with shadowing, and unless that individual is able to perform that activity unaided, and if they're still being shown how to do something, obviously you have to keep accurate recordings, and you can't just say, oh, well, it was approximately a day, because you will be challenged on those things. It's got to be accurate. It's got to be carefully thought of. But there are a number of activities, such as I've given, that can be incorporated into that, as opposed to what I sometimes come across as, oh, right, okay, so it's Friday now. I've got to give, Bill, Mary, Susan, 6-hour slot. It doesn't have to be that disconnected from the working week. If you look at what activities and you plan it properly and you're measuring it properly, there are some activities that you can include into that 20% that's taking place naturally. It's natural evidence, and natural evidence for me is the best. Now, just going on to 9 is lack of time, and it is the #1 reason why people drop their apprenticeship. So we have managers saying that they must ensure apprentices have time to learn. We've got planned learning breaks, it's busy seasons, it's retail. I gave you an example about December. You've got December sales, you've got Christmas, whether you celebrate or you don't. It's a busy period. So you've got to take those things in the peaks and troughs of a business. You've got to make sure that you don't lose sight of the objective, the upskill, the motivation, why you're retraining. And then obviously there's the partnership between yourselves, the line managers, the training provider, the learner, the apprentice. So there's a lot of things that are going around that you need to take into consideration when doing that apprenticeship journey. And an insight to how I found the best way to do this, and this is just a personal preference, is that the best way I found is to do a training schematic for the year. And you plot that in for the year, the activities, the exact date when you're going to do face-to-face sessions, if you are doing any online webinars, when they're going to take place, what the subject is that's going to be given. Now, that may change, but if you're doing it over the year, you can also sit down with the managers and with the team leaders, and you can say, okay, well, from a business perspective, where are the peaks and troughs within this? Okay, and you can say, well, how about, we have still got to make that content, and we've got to have active learning. We know this through the rules, but you can also have, periods and months where you've got accelerated learning, and then you've got other months where it's minimized because of the needs of the business. And if you're then able to plot that journey out, that whole journey out, and like I said, there's always a plan. The plan may change, but as long as you've got a plan, you can measure. You can then also very quickly identify, whether you're using e-portfolio systems or not, but you can easily identify very quickly when someone is starting to fall behind in progress, whether that's from a learner perspective and what was initiated by that through sickness, or whether it's a business objective where it was all hands on deck, so to speak. But then you can easily see that you're already behind where you wanted to be, and then you can then get together and plan in how you're going to catch up and when you're going to catch up. So for me, the process I firmly believe has helped us in particular is having a very visual and a very carefully plotted and planned apprenticeship learner journey. through the period of that, whether it's 12 months, 15 months, or 18 months. And then you're able to combat that number one reason, which is the lack of time, which is either my manager doesn't give me enough time, I never get time off the line to be able to do the work that you're giving me. You know, training provider, have you completed the actions that I've given you, the tasks? Have you completed the assignment? No, I haven't. It's just been super busy. It's been crazy at work, and I generally don't have any space or time to complete the activities. And then that obviously continues to the next period where you're going to be measuring the key performance and the progression and progress. And so it really has to be a tripartite agreement. And by doing that, everybody then has an invested interest. When you have an invested interest, you then have ownership. If you have ownership of that, the learners owning that, and the line managers and the business are owning that journey and that commitment, and like I said, if it's visual and it's clearly understood by everybody, it really helps to avoid that number one reason for people dropping off their apprenticeship. Number 10, and lastly, is unlike any uni course, there are no tuition fees. Now, I need to caveat that slightly because there are two different ways of doing an apprenticeship, and also I like to say it is not free. Okay, I've always spoken to our team, and when we're engaging with clients, we don't say an apprenticeship is free. And even before it's changed to the way we now understand it with the levy and non-levy, even before then, it was never free, because it required your time or the time of the learner to be released to undertake that training or that apprenticeship. And time is money. So whilst there might not be a transactional exchange of monies, it isn't free, and it never has been free. It's been a case of being offset, yes, and now we have got two approaches. You've got the levy approach and you've got the non-levy. So if it starts off with the non-levy, and you may or may not be aware, so whatever that program is, you are required as a non-levy paying organisation to contribute 5% of whatever the value of that apprenticeship is. And the government will then fund the other 95% of that program. From a levy perspective, if you are a levy organisation and you're then getting on a monthly basis, that percentage over that £3 million payroll, percentage of that going into your digital apprenticeship service account, you will then be able to embark on an apprenticeship, and you'll be able to embark on that based on obviously the needs and doing things right, like I said, but you'll be able to take and onboard apprentices based on what you have in that account. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have got a leadership and management apprenticeship, and you'll be able to see this. It's all out in the open domain. You can go into gov.uk and you can type in funding bands, and I'm sure you probably already have done that. You go down to leadership and management, you'll be able to see what the maximum band is. So let's just say 7,000 for leadership and management. Just as an example, if you were able to utilize that and say, right, I'm going to be wanting to put 5 people on that, you don't need to have 7,000 times 5. You don't have to have that in your digital service account. What you need to be able to have is whatever the program is and whatever your gap is. Like the leadership management was originally 9,000, for example, but obviously as they've looked at those rates, and you need to continue to look at those because they will change. What you then need to be able to do is then be able to say, okay, well, that program is over 12, 15, 18 months. Therefore, you need to have either a 12th, a 15th, or an 18th in your DAS account per person. Okay, so you don't have to wait until you've got £7,000 sitting there. And I think that's quite important. It wouldn't affect the levy paying companies that are, paying the levy quite considerably. What I mean by that is it's a little bit like the tax changes of the 20% tax and the 40% tax. If you're paying heavily or you're earning heavily well above the threshold, you know that you're going to be paying that tax, and you take that into account. Where it really hurts is if you are just tipping over the threshold and then you've got to pay the 40% tax. So those levy paying customers that are just levy paying, just tipped over the edge, it is really important to understand that you don't have to have a whole apprenticeship band sitting in your digital apprenticeship service account. You just need to have the on-program payment for that. Because if you are just tipping over, you are going to be going, levy is to fund apprentices. Whereas if you have a significant amount of money going in, you can quite easily see, and even if you didn't know, you might say, well, we do need an apprentice and we could start them in January, as opposed to saying, well, we have to wait until that levy pots, and we're only putting in £100 every month. Therefore, it's going to be 7 months before we can start an apprentice. So I think it's just very, very clear just to be able to understand that. And then on top of that, we also have the flexibility of levy transfer for those individuals who have a large levy and may not be able to spend all of their levy, and they may want to engage with charities or supply chains to be able to donate that levy. So there are a number of different avenues available depending on your position, but I do think it is a very cost-effective way. And I think that from a leveling perspective, as an SME ourselves, to be able to say that there are programs out there, and some programs, depending on their complexity, some programs are £15,000-20,000, even more than that. But to be able to say that actually, if I had a real need and a niche for that as an SME, and I wanted to take an apprentice on, that I wouldn't have to wait until I had a training budget to encompass £27,000 or £20,000 to be able to take on and pay an apprenticeship to be delivered, as an SME. Like I said, the rules are the 5%. So in that situation, if I was a non-levy paying SME, I could then be able to go, okay, well, as a non-levy paying, I've got access to a £27,000 program, and actually I only have to pay 5%. And I know I say only, because like I said, everyone is challenged with business at the moment, but having the ability to have that option to have the government, pick up the tab for the other 95%, to be able to grow the skills that I need as a business, and that individual would require to be able to accurately deliver the tasks and to be able to perform both the knowledge, skills and behaviours in the business is a great thing. And if I am a levy paying organisation and I'm a levy paying SME and I'm just tipped over, the facts and the knowledge of saying, well, I don't have to wait until I've got this huge amount of money before I can engage, means that I can plan, like I said, sitting down planning when, how that onboarding and embarkment of that apprenticeship journey is going to take place. I think is a very positive thing. Now, just I promise you, we are getting to the end of this. In fact, there is only 2 more slides after this, so thank you for your time. So going back to some questions. How many of you are now considering apprenticeships as a way to address the skills gap or skills shortage? Can I just see some hands? Okay, thank you very much. We've got some there, Sherry, thank you. Got a few nods or a couple of undecided individuals, I appreciate the fact that might not be something that is going to be a decision for you now, but hopefully, if nothing else, I have given you a lot of food for thought and given you from my perspective, some of the mythbusters that I think is relevant based on the engagement and discussions I've had with a number of customers, companies on a wide range of skill sets. So, some in leadership and management, some in customer service, some in technical, some in hairdressing, for example. So each business has its own challenges, and from my experience and my team's experience, these are the top 10. And if I've been able to at least give you food for thought today, and even if it's a case of that food for thought comes out with a host of questions, at least I've sparked your curiosity in finding out a little bit more, and hopefully may have changed one or two people's minds or perceptions. I would just like to open the floor to any questions, and I will endeavour my best to answer them as fully as I can. If you could please just place your questions in the chat, and then we can try to actually grab all of those questions, and also be able to not only make them available to everybody, but also that we will be able to share the answers to those questions.
Thank you so much, Jason. Been manning the chat while you've been doing your amazing presentation. There was a slight question from Judy Diamond. I don't know if you want to unmute, Judy, and ask yourself, but yeah, it was about how to find out more opportunities for SMEs to receive funding, for them to access their services, really. So, Judy, I don't know if you want to unmute and ask that yourself.
Hi, yes. I'm from Azets, the accountants, and I'm actually in a team where we provide, we specialise in helping clients with software issues, and so part of what we offer is training on software and so on. And I didn't realise that the presentation would be mostly about apprenticeships today, which is interesting. I've learned a few things, but I'm just wondering, is there opportunities for SMEs to get funding for sort of ad hoc training rather than full apprenticeships? Because obviously we can offer services and we'd like it to be more available to more SMEs.
Absolutely, and I already had Cherry. I'm sorry, she's quite far away, so I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name quite rightly, even with the four eyes. She's really giving the thumbs up. So absolutely, yes, there is.
So I should talk to Cherry about it.
No, you're more than happy to have a.
Oh, you're on mute, Cherry. That's it.
Sorry, no, I was actually saying that I agree with Judy, and I wanted to know this same thing as hers. What funds are available for this training? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. So yes, there are some funds available for training. So there are a variety of different streams that you can engage with. So for example, there is the National Skills Fund. So that is available. So that is for individuals that are already employed and who do not hold a full level 3. So there are some free programs that are available for industries up and down. I will be honest, the list is not as wide as I'd like it to be. It's quite restrictive in terms of what's on there, but there is that. And I have to also just mention that there are slight changes to what's available depending on your geographical location. So for argument's sake, if you're in a non-devolved area, there is a set of programs that are fundable and available. If you are in London and you're just over that and you're now sitting into the devolved area of the Greater London Combined Authority, they have some of the same things, but they have a few other variations. And likewise with all 11 other devolved areas, such as Manchester, the GMCA area. So there won't be the exact same qualifications available, but yes, there is, and that is available, and we are able to help and support in most areas. So anything non-devolved we can help and assist with directly. If it is in London or in Manchester area, again, we can help directly with you on that if you would like to do that. And obviously non-devolved sits really nicely because it sits in our home, and that means that anyone in Kent, we can actually help and assist businesses via that avenue. We also have adult education budgets that are available. Now that is more about if you were looking to bring somebody on into your business and apprenticeships weren't the right way, but what you did want is you did want that individual to come to you with a set of skills. Now that might be, I'm just using this as an example, that might be that you're a construction company and you're looking for individuals to come and work on a construction site, but you want them to have their green labourers card, which is their license to practice. We provide the training for those individuals. We provide the test, the card, and their PPE. And then what we would then be able to do is then link you and say, you know, we have got these individuals that have completed, have access to all of this. Would you like to interview them? And then you might interview them and employ them. So there are different training pots available for different scenarios. So it might be quite useful, maybe, if it could, maybe, like I said, in the chat or via emails, if you could maybe just let me know what you're looking for, and then I could try to actually tailor it to your exact situation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I hope that answered that for you, Judy. But Cherry and Judy especially, if you want to be connected with Jason, then more than happy to do that. If and I'll reach out to you and give sorry, I can't get my words out. Give you his details moving forward anyway. But yeah, so just a bit conscious of the time, really. One more question from Andy in relation to funding again, which I think everyone wanted to kind of know a little bit more about. Is there funding support available for mature students looking to train as a mental health counsellor?
Yes, there is. I have to caveat that slightly because the reason I don't want to give a blanket is, yes, there is, but there are certain parameters of eligibility that we would need to check. But overarching, yes, but depending on the exact situation, it may then prevent them from doing so. So I don't want it to be a blanket, but in theory, yes, there is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Jason, your presentation was so insightful and informative. I'm sure that everyone found it really, really beneficial. What really kind of stands out to me is that forgetting curve, and I was looking at the end brain thinking, yeah, that's my brain. but thank you so much, Jason, for today. Really appreciate it. Everyone else, if you do need any further information, or if you want to, ask me to connect you with Jason, please get in contact with us. More than welcome. My name's Victoria. I'm in the membership side, but more than happy to, assist you with any queries that you have. Yes, so if we have future events coming up next month. It's all to do with Christmas, so yeah, more than welcome to go on the website and have a look at those as a physical and online event, really. But Jason, thank you again. It was so great seeing you, and lovely to see everybody as well. This presentation will be sent to everybody, and it's also been recorded, so if you ever do want to look at it back, then you can do so. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, we've run over by 8 minutes. I hope that's okay for everyone, but lovely to see you, and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you everyone for attending.
You, Jason, stay back with me at the end.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Ah, Matt, hello.
Hi, Vic. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad at all. How are you? How are you, Jason?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very
Jason,
well.
that was so good.
Thank you very much. We had a few technical issues, which hopefully wasn't too apparent. So
Didn't
that's where the
notice
fun
at
came
all.
from, where we had some transitional delays. So as is with the case.